Vrising's 1.1 update has brought major changes to one of the core mechanics of the game: blood types and blood mixing. Whether you're a veteran stalker of the night or a newly risen fledgling, this update is going to change how you hunt, feed, and fight. Greetings, mortals! It is I, Remortis, and today we are finally back in Vardoran. Vrising's 1.1 update has just launched, and with it a major overhaul to the blood system. In this guide, we'll be going over each blood type and their uses. But perhaps the biggest change is that we can mix our bloods together, and we'll be going over various potential combinations for various builds. Enough of me yapping, let's just get right into it, shall we? So first, let's start off with the basics. In Vrising, feeding on different enemies will grant you different blood types, such as warrior, rogue, scholar, brute, and so on. And each type will give you unique bonuses, and the quality of blood determines how powerful and how many of the bonuses you get from each blood. Blood is also what powers your attacks, whether it be your physical attacks or your spells, and is very important to have this. Without it, you will wither and die. You are a vampire after all. Each blood is divided into 5 different tiers. 1 to 29 is tier 1, 30 to 59 is tier 2, 60 to 89 is tier 3, 90 to 99 is tier 4, and 100% is tier 5. And generally, you want to have 100% bloods for each type you can get. So you must always be sure to keep your blood tanks filled, and to the highest quality possible, so that way you're fighting at your highest potential. That way you have the highest chance of surviving fights, whether it be in player versus environment or player versus player. And you could easily just go around and suck the blood of anything that's nearby for convenience. However, there is a really nice way that you can actually capture precious bloods and keep them for later use. And at 1.1 they expanded on the types of enemies that we can capture in our prisons. For the most part, if they have a blood type, we can most likely capture it. There are a few exceptions, however, including most of the Draculins are still relatively off limits, except for our lovely Exsanguinator and our Succubi. But as you can see, we have a bunch of different varieties of enemies here. None of these are highest quality, but that's okay. It's just still nice that we can actually get our blood sources from other ways. So we can actually get Scholar from witches and harpies. We can get various types of creatures besides the elusive werewolf. And also we can get mutants into the ring, as well as the new corrupted blood from the wildlife. Lots of new great options to find that perfect blood type. And speaking of blood types, let's go ahead and look at all the current effects from each blood type. Starting with warrior. So warrior blood used to be the quintessential dueling blood. That's still fairly the case here, however there are some modifications for it, and warrior is probably one of the bloods that had the biggest overhauls. In 1.1, a new stat available to us has been introduced, in the form of weapon charge. Weapon charges are pretty sweet in that they essentially act as a free cast for your weapons. Every time you use a weapon ability, you'll be able to generate weapon charges, and once you get to 100 or above, your next cast will be free, and you'll be able to cast again. So this can open up a ton of different varieties of combos if you're quick enough, such as going into a spear Q, into an E, into another Q, or so on and so on. You can get the idea. And so keeping in the mind of the weapon charges, the warrior blood is all about weapon power, weapon skills, and physical damage. So at tier 1, we will get increased physical power, and our veil attacks will deal bonus damage. Veil attacks being your dash attacks, that is. Tier 2 is increased weapon cooldown rate, or in other words, lowering your cooldowns for your weapon abilities, as well as weapon skill leech. Tier 3 gives you enhanced weapon skill power, and also gives you extra damage if you are at full health. Tier 4 is going to be one of the main features you should keep an eye on, is the weapon charge gain. The reason I want to mention that Tier 4 is the more important part, when we get into blood mixing, which I'll go into in a moment, the Tier 4 ability for every blood type is going to always be active whenever you mix any type of blood, if the blood quality is high enough. So in the case of blood mixing, you need to have your bloods be 90% or higher in order to get the Tier 4 bonus here for your mixing. So warrior blood is really cool because with this new weapon charge system, it makes a lot of weapons a lot more powerful and feel a lot more fun to play with. I think my favorite winners for the warrior blood is using the broadsword or the one-handed sword, as well as the pistols. The one-handed sword E, that is a knockup and strikes an enemy multiple times up in the air, does a ton of damage if you build correctly. And then also with the weapon charges, if you're a pistol user, you're going to really enjoy using your pistols a lot more. It's going to make you feel like an even crazier gunslinger. Any build that is going to be relying on a lot of your physical damage, you're going to want warrior blood. It is a really solid blood to have. And at the end of introducing each blood type, that's when we'll get into the nitty-gritty with all the different blood type combinations. Moving on to rogue. Now, Rogue is more or less the same as it was before. Most of its effects revolve around getting critical strikes and dealing more critical damage, as well as getting better veil attacks. Our Tier 1 is going to give us increased physical critical strike chance, as well as critical power. Our Tier 2 bonus is going to give us movement speed, as well as additional speed whenever we land a killing strike. And as you can see, Rogue is all about landing those veil attacks and just obliterating your enemy with a variety of combos, whether it's spell or physical. So keep an eye out for this blood, as always. Brute blood has quite a bit of an overhaul and has definitely become the bruiser blood of choice. It acquired the warrior's old passive, as well as gaining some lovely bonuses here. The Tier 1 ability will give us increased attack speed as well as physical power. Not too shabby. Our Tier 2 ability will give us life leech on our primary attacks, also known as auto attacks or just your regular melee swings, and then we also get damage reduction. Well, Tier 3 is a little bit of an interesting one, as it will increase our maximum health and also heal us a little bit whenever we land a killing blow, whether it be PvE or PvP. The reason that it's interesting is because our veil attacks, or our dash attacks, will always heal you based on your maximum hit points. So if you have other ways to increase your maximum health, each time you land a veil attack, you'll be healing a lot more than somebody who didn't have increased health. As long as you keep landing your veil attacks, you'll just become even harder to kill because you'll be healing for so much. And our Tier 4 ability was stolen from Warrior from 1.0, and it will give us a chance to parry an attack, which reduces the damage we take by a considerable amount, up to 25%. And it will also increase our own physical power for a few seconds after that. So Brute Blood is pretty solid on its own, however, it is better when it is paired as a secondary blood, and we'll get more on that in a moment. Essentially, by combining Brute Blood as a secondary, you pretty much make any build a whole lot more tankier, depending on what you're going for, whether it's just straight up damage reduction, enhanced health, but no matter what, you'll always have that extra parry chance, which will just reduce your damage, which will keep you alive longer. Pretty solid blood to have. Moving on to a fan favorite from 1.0, Scholar is a caster blood and has had quite a bit of a revamp. Before, we used to get spellcast grant for free at random intervals. Sometimes you can get back-to-back spellcasts, or sometimes you get a big lull with nothing happening. So that's changed. Scholar Blood will give us spell charge increases, meaning every time we cast a spell, we'll gain spell charges. When we get to up to 100, we can cast another spell for free. And there's a variety of ways we can enhance our spell charge gain, and Scholar is one of the primary ways to do that. The other theme of the Scholar build is enhancing your shield efficiency as well as making your ultimates a lot more powerful. But let's get into each of the tiers. Tier 1 will simply increase your spell power and your shield efficiency, which is pretty damn solid. Tier 2 will give us enhanced cooldown rate, as well as shielding ourselves for a good amount of spell power whenever we cast a spell. It gets pretty nutty, especially if you really start stacking a lot of spell power. Makes you really hard to kill, in combination with your own shield spells as well as this effect. Pretty nuts. Our Tier 3 ability is also cracked. It'll enhance our ultimate by a ton, but more importantly, it'll reset our other spell cooldowns whenever we cast an ultimate. This can make for some crazy combos, especially if you know you have some spell charges on the way. So you could unload your spells, cast an ultimate, and unload your spells again, and potentially get spell charges in between all of those and getting even more casts. And obviously our Tier 4 ability here is going to be able to give us our spell charge gains, and Scholar Blood is phenomenal. Some would even say it's probably a little overtuned right now. I guess we're going to have to see if there's going to be an upcoming patch soon to kind of tone it down. As it stands, it is pretty cracked, especially in combination with some other bloods. And we'll get into the Scholar combinations after all this. Moving on, we're going to go to Draculin. So Draculin has become a spellcasting blood as well, and it's more focused on spell critical strikes. And let's just get right into our Tier 1, which will just simply increase our spell power as well as our spell critical power. Not too shabby, especially if you're using specific spells that want to blow people up in a single instance. Things such as Chaos Barrage, for example. Our Tier 2 ability will give us increased spell critical chance, and spell hits will grant us extra movement speed for a few seconds. And this all that matters is that you land the spell. It doesn't need to critically hit for this bonus movement speed. It's pretty sweet. Our Tier 3 ability will give us spell leech and increase spell charge gain. Not too shabby. And then our Tier 4 ability will make it so that our spell cooldowns will be reduced by quite a bit once we critically strike. And this thing can be pretty nutty, especially if you combine it with Scholar. Holy crap, if you can chain things correctly and get your stats correct, you'll be slinging spells to no end. Draculin is pretty nice. Probably not as crazy as Scholar, but it's still pretty solid and feels pretty fun to play with. So Mutant Blood has been overhauled and now is the blood for minion damage, but also enhances our ultimates. Our Tier 1 ability will give us enhanced spell power and increased movement speed. while we are shapeshifted. Our tier 2 ability will lower our ultimate cooldown rate and will spawn some mutant rats to fight on our side whenever we cast an ultimate. It's kind of interesting. This is more effective for you in PvE. In PvP, sometimes your enemies can use those mutant rats against you. Not to mention that the mutant rat AI is kind of goofy in that it kind of runs around your enemies kind of weird. Only 2 of them isn't too much to write home about. Usually the mutant rats do well when there's a ton of them. Moving on, our tier 3 will increase our ultimate power as well as increasing our minion damage. Perhaps there might be a solid summoning build out there, definitely for the PvE side of things. In PvP, I think people are still trying to figure things out. We'll get more on that at another video. And our tier 4 ability for the mutant blood is actually kind of interesting. It'll lower our cooldown rate for our veils, making us dash a little bit more often, and more importantly, whenever we land a veil attack, it'll reduce our cooldown by up to 7 seconds. That's pretty nice, especially if you're doing a specific build that just revolves around a ton of ultimate power and just blowing people up. As long as you can land those veil attacks, you can make that happen. So mutant blood is actually kind of interesting. Not too many people mess around with it right now, but there are some interesting blood combinations, which we'll go over in a minute, that you might not have considered. Moving on, we will go to creature blood. Creature blood has also been revamped quite a bit. It receives some of the benefits that mutant used to have, and honestly, creature is a little bit underestimated. Most people will probably just glance over it and not give it a second chance, but there are some things in here that you might need to consider, whether it's for PvP or some tricks in PvP. Our tier 1 ability will increase our maximum health, as well as getting enhanced health regeneration. Our tier 2 will simply increase our movement speed, as well as our shapeshifted speed. Our tier 3 will let us get enhanced healing received, which is one of the new stats in the game, as well as increasing our resistances. In our tier 4, honestly, I think you can write this off. Our bite will heal you by extra health, and will also temporarily increase your attack speed and physical power by 25%. Honestly, creature blood actually makes for a really good PvE type blood, although there are some tricks in PvP, which we'll go over in a little bit as well. Namely, the resistances will help you stave off garlic a lot quicker, as well as completely ignoring holy resistance, but we'll get on that in a bit. And then we'll talk about the newest blood added in 1.1, corrupted blood. This blood can be found all throughout Oakvale, and oh boy, this blood is kind of crazy. So our first tier will reduce damage that we take from corrupted attacks, which a ton of enemies in Oakvale will do to you. We'll also get additional life leech, and we also suffer 10% increased damage from other sources. Our tier 2 reduces the maximum amount of vile corruption stacks by 4 to 8, but you suffer 50 to 100% of the blood drain effect. So tier 1 and tier 2 are not really anything to write home about. Honestly, they don't really seem good at all. Where things get crazy is our tier 3 and tier 4. Tier 3 will increase our movement speed and our attack speed, but there's also a 25% chance to trigger an interruption whenever we are hit by any source of damage, inflicting a 2-second stare. It also does damage to us. And our tier 4 spell and weapon charge gain is increased by 15. But there's a 30% chance to spawn a shadow that attacks you when using an ability. So this blood combination is actually kind of cracked, especially with the way stats work. So you can use this blood and get a bunch of free stats if you're willing to accept the risks. So let's go ahead and take a look at what this means. So as you see, we got hit by that explosion when we were hit. This can be a little bit of a debilitating thing, however, you can always just jump out of it or use an iframe to avoid the damage. So as you see right there, that shadow attacked us, and we can move out of the way of it and potentially use it against our enemies or use it on our own self. We can do some fun tricks with it. It can also be used to trigger your own barriers or counters to help, whether or not you want to trigger like a freeze or perhaps something like mistrance to use it to teleport away from something. The reason why the corrupted blood is so insane is that you can get a lot of artificial stat increases that you wouldn't normally have access to, meaning that you can round out your build a bit more. So either you can use this to shore up your stats and your builds to get a ton of free stats here and put those stats somewhere else, since there are plenty of stat caps. And honestly, you would never run corrupted as a main blood. The first 2 tiers are absolutely useless to us and don't really give us anything that we really want to look out for. But tier 3 and tier 4 is why we would run this blood, and probably makes it the best secondary blood type to run with any combination of blood, honestly. It is pretty nuts. So in order to even mix your blood, you need to kill Lucille, the Venom Alchemist, who can be located in Oak Vale, specifically this area right here called the Venom Mixing Outpost. She's a pretty fun fight on both normal and brutal. However, I find her to be a lot easier fighting with 2 people on brutal. Typically, most brutal fights are better as a single player fighting against it. However, this one, it feels a lot easier with 2 people. Just keep that in consideration for you duos and squads out there. So once you have defeated Lucille and you've got your blood homogenizer, simply put whatever your primary blood type you'd like to have, meaning that you're going to have all 4 of the effects of the primary blood type, and then put your secondary blood type in the second position, and you get to choose 1 trait to pass on to the final blood mix. Your tier 4 ability will always be passed on to your blood combination, so long as you're 90% or higher. Then you need to consider which trait you want to have, whether it's your tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. In the case of the Warrior and Corrupted Blood, we're going to want a tier 3 trait. The tier 1s and tier 2s are pretty terrible, but tier 3 is insane. And rolling straight into all the different blood mixes, let's begin with the Corrupted Blood mix. So honestly, my favorite 2 types to combine with the Corrupted Blood would be Warrior, since we get all those lovely weapon effects and weapon charge gain, which will stack with the weapon charge gain from the Corrupted Blood. Or you could also consider using the Scholar Blood. Scholar Blood will also give you spell charges, which will also stack with the spell charge from the Corrupted, but also give you the other crazy benefits that Scholar gives you. It is pretty handy. So keep an eye out, folks out there, for people running Corrupted Blood. They're going to be moving really fast, and they're going to be casting a lot of spells and smacking you with all kinds of weapons. Very good blood indeed. However, we're going to keep moving on with different Warrior Blood variations now. Obviously, the strongest I think is going to be the Warrior with the Corrupted, but it is a bit risky in that you have to worry about those other effects, so it's up to you whether you want to take that risk. If you want some more safer builds, let's go ahead and look at the Warrior Rogue, which is all about doing more damage from your weapons and such, but also getting some lovely bonuses from our rogue traits. Now, if you want to do Warrior Primary, our secondary rogue ability, we might want to consider getting either movement if we need more movement speed in our build, or getting reduced cooldowns on our veils, as well as getting 100% crit chance after using a veil. This could be really nice, especially if you're really good at landing those veil attacks and doing some pretty cool combos. However, while Warrior Rogue is pretty good, I would probably recommend you pick Rogue Primary with Warrior Secondary. And as for our trait from the Warrior that we want to pass over, obviously we'll be getting our weapon charges, but we will probably take the trait 1, which will increases our physical power, but also lets our veil attacks do extra bonus damage, which pairs really nicely with Rogue, since Rogue's all about doing extra damage after hitting somebody with a veil attack. It just goes hand in hand. So say you want to be up in their face and be a little bit tankier. Well, probably the ultimate Bruiser Blood is going to be Warrior Primary with Brute Secondary. And as for what trait you want, honestly, it doesn't really matter for the most part. All that matters is that you get that parry chance that Warrior used to have, and there's a variety of ways you can enhance your builds based on whatever stats you're missing at that time. Each of these have their uses. Tier 1 gets us even faster attack speed and physical power. Can't say no to that. Tier 2 gives you life leech on your attacks, that's whatever, but more importantly we get enhanced damage reduction, and if you stack a ton of damage reduction, this could actually add up. There's also an argument for having the tier 3 with having the max health, giving you more healing whenever you do land your veil attack. So really any of these options will do nicely, but it really just depends on your stats and what kind of build you're really going for. If I were to do just a generic one, I would probably just pick the top trait. If you want to be a bit tankier, pick tier 2 and tier 3. Pretty solid all around. However, continue on with our Brute Blood if you want to be the quote-unquote tankiest. But moving on to some other tanky builds, we'll move on to the Scholar and Brute combination. So this is a very tanky and a very annoying blood combination for your enemies to deal with. So not only will you be able to shield yourself by quite a bit, you'll be able to get stronger shields and more casts and such like that, but the Brute will just make you last a lot longer. The parry is going to be really nice to just reduce your damage overall, but you also could have the enhanced damage reduction, or you can also just increase your maximum health, just making you that more annoying to kill. Scholar Brute is a very common combination and also very annoying to deal with because they can keep casting spells, they're really tanky, and they're just really annoying to destroy. And honestly, in the case of some certain builds, they can just have so many shields that you just cannot get through to them, and they can just 1v4 you. So it's just something to keep in mind, and yeah, I don't want to recommend this too much because I don't want to see Scholar Brutes everywhere. Moving on to one of the more common spell casting combination, which would be the Scholar Primary with the Draculin Secondary. And again, this is just like the Warrior Brute in that each trait has their own merits. So you kind of have to figure out what you might want to end up going for. Personally, I would argue between trait 1 and trait 2. Trait 3 does have its uses, but I don't value the spell leech or the increased spell charge there by 3%. That's not too important to me right there. Trait 2 and trait 1, however, definitely are. So trait 1 obviously just enhances our spell power and also increases our critical power on top of that. Trait 2, however, increases your crit chance, but more importantly, will also increase your movement speed. So this is another way for you to get some movement speed on those more builds that just focus on pure spell power and don't have a lot of ways to get different move speed bonuses. This is one way to get that and help you get to your maximum cap. Unfortunately, the movement speed does not work on our ignite ticks or damage over times or anything like that. If it did, it'd make this blood a whole lot nicer. So if you're going to go with the Scholar or Draculin, I highly encourage picking trait 1 or trait 2, and this will make you just blow people up quite often. Another fun combo is simply Scholar and Mutant Blood. Honestly, each of these traits also have their merits, now that I'm thinking about it. So every time you use your ultimate, you'll get your spell cooldowns back, and you have even more ultimate power. You can use your trait 3 to get even more ultimate power there and mutant damage. There are some interesting combos here that you could really run that actually matter with the mutant damage. Namely some one-shot spider ultimate combos, but we'll get on those type of builds at a later date. Right now we're just strictly just talking about bloods and spitballing here. Trait 2 can be nice to help you get your cooldowns back even faster, especially if you keep landing your veils. The mutant rest that can be spawned from casting your ultimate can be useful, but most of the time I feel like they're not going to be that handy for you, at least in PvP. So really, I guess on a PvP standpoint, you'd be looking at the trait 1 and trait 3. Do you want stronger ultimates, or do you just want to have some more spell power and kind of more importantly, the shapeshift speed? Some people might roll their eyes looking at shapeshifted movement speed. That's mostly like the eyes from a duel or an arena standpoint. Now in the open world, that shapeshift speed could be all the difference of escaping your enemies and just getting just out of reach of one of their attacks and allowing you to escape with all that juicy loot. But retaining the mutant blood here, let's go ahead and look at 2 fun builds that I don't think people are really going to consider. And one such combination would be creature blood with mutant blood, as well with the mutant blood trait 1 here. Now the purpose of this video is just to showcase some different blood combinations and some sample ideas for some builds. However, this one we're going to specifically be using a passive here, Feral Haste, which enhances our shapeshift speed by 15%. And that's going to stack with our new creature and mutant blood here. Our passive, with our wolf passive, will enhance our movement speed by 50%. Our mutant blood is increasing it by 10%, and the creature is enhancing it by a further 8%. So let's go ahead and hop into our wolf. And if we look at our traits here, we're moving at 9.4 movement speed. And if you can see here, this is pretty fast. It's not quite as fast as the top speed horses, which can hit up to 11, but this is still pretty handy, especially considering you can get into your wolf form a lot quicker than some people can get on their horses. Not to mention that you have a lot more control on your wolf compared to that of a horse, meaning you can do some nifty escapes with this. And sometimes that could be life or death. Now this doesn't just affect wolf, this affects all of your forms. So another thing you might want to consider is, say you're trying to escape and you notice that you can outrun your enemies, but you can't quite get away from them. Maybe you might want to use Rat, which is the fastest way to turn into an animal, and then you can do some shenanigans with that. And as you can see, it did give us a little bit more movement speed than we currently had. So our normal movement speed was 4.9, switch into Rat, which is a pretty fast cast time, and now we're moving at 5.8. This could also help you escape your enemies. Of course, there's always some fun shenanigans you can do with your human form here. Look at that, we are moving fast. That is one fast granny. Honestly, there's not a real purpose of this, I guess, unless you're trying to race that other vampire you see nearby from getting those books, in which case a fight will probably ensue. So, but another thing to consider is using bat form. This will probably be one of the fastest ways to travel during night, if not the fastest. We have a whopping 15.8 movement speed here. So look at that, we are zooming incredibly fast, faster than horses even. So perhaps you're trying to escape from people or get to a certain spot really quickly, or perhaps you're trying to help your squad mate catch up to somebody that they're pursuing. You might use this to cut them off. But beyond that, without any holy potion whatsoever, we can handle heavy holy radiation in our bear form very, very nicely. As you can see, we're only receiving 1 damage per tick here. And that's only in combination with our cape that has 15 holy resistance, our bear form, as well as this lovely creature blood. And we can exit here. Without it, we can take 5. And I think we're still out healing just standing here without any help whatsoever. Not too shabby. So another fun kind of build you can do with creature would be in combination with the brute blood. Either you can do brute primary or creature primary, but the main thing you want to stack is the maximum health boosts here. So let's go ahead and combine that with the brute blood here. Now we increase our health to max. I don't think it's quite the maximum health. Let me look at our attributes here. Oh, nope, it is. We are exactly at 49%. So this is another way to get your max health up if you so desired. Whether you want to have the creature blood here or brute blood, it's up to you as your primary. This will probably be a solid blood for you to run around and farm with. Honestly, I think the mutant blood in combination with the creature blood would be the ultimate way to farm, especially if you're solo, so that way you can escape if you really need to. Or if you can, that is. So moving on to rogue, we did touch on it a bit earlier with the warrior blood combination, but it's also pretty solid with the Draculin. Since rogue wants lots of crits, we can also guarantee crits if it avails, so you can do some fun stuff with your spell critical strikes here. So honestly, trait 1 and trait 2 would be really good considerations. And most likely, since you are in rogue blood, you'll probably already be at your movement speed cap, you might consider just running trait 1. Just to run some very agile spellcasting builds that do quite a good burst damage based on your crits. And that's pretty much some of the mixes that are standing out to me. Obviously, there are some other combinations out there that somebody might discover, or perhaps you might have a blood type combination that you like. Let me know what your favorite combination of bloods are down in the comments below. This new system opens the door to various hybrid builds and adaptive playstyles. Blood mixing rewards flexible players who can think on their feet and adds a lot more depth onto Variety's already rich combat system. Expect to see entirely new metas emerge, especially in PvP, as players figure out other optimal builds and bloodbending strategies. If you enjoyed this guide, please like, comment, subscribe to see more guides like this. And I'll see you in the next video or stream. Farewell for now.